Please welcome to the stage Amanda, Todd, and Jimmy Mackin.
All right, fantastic. It's nice not having Chris out here to basically misquote me on things. It's awesome to have Amanda here. There's an Amanda in every one of your markets. For those of you who've been in the business for 10 years, 15, 20 years, she's that wolf that's climbing up the hill, right? She's that one nipping at your heels. And she's done an amazing job going from basically nothing to now 18 months in the business, going to be closing around $17 to $18 million this year. And where I wanted to take this interview was just talk specifically about, as you guys know, I'm the trenches guy, the day-to-day operations, right? How do you do it? How do you manage it? And where you're at today. So let's kick it off with just your morning, because this is actually, we had a guy on the show, Hal Elrod, that you follow his philosophy.
Definitely. Well, I do a miracle morning every morning, and for those of you who are not familiar with what that is, Hal Elrod wrote a book that's called The Miracle Morning, and it's about centering yourself and really taking control of your day from the very beginning. I get up somewhere between 4:30 and 5:30 every morning, and I journal, I meditate, I do affirmations, I work out, and that's my day, and I read something. And so that's how I start my day, and then I'm showered and ready to go, and I get my kids up for school. And that's how I begin every single day. And if for some reason I don't begin my day that way, I truly feel off all day.
There's like a lot of science behind this, but I think obviously like your gut can kind of feel it. You get the most amount of work done where you're not getting emails, right? So those early morning hours when you're actually able to get all that done, within an hour or 30 minutes, you'd be, shocked at what you can accomplish. Kind of building on that to some degree. You obviously have to be very strict with the time that you have, right? You have a specific schedule you follow, a routine you follow. I want you to talk about what you spend your time investing in terms of the compound effect we were talking about before.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I really am big into reading with my Miracle Morning. I read, and I've read multiple times actually, a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And I am not a Keller Williams agent. He has great things that he's written. And it's talking about the premise in the book is what is the one thing that I could be doing that by doing this, everything else wouldn't really matter. And so for me, I have focused on what are the one things in my business. What can I be doing that day that is the one thing? Because we can literally fill our days with everything. There's a million fires we can be putting out. But if we focus on that one thing, a lot of times some of the fires just kind of resolve themselves, especially when we put help in place that can take care of some of those things that even though it's on our mind, we still need to focus ourselves back on that most important thing. So for example, like with Curaytor, with all the seller leads that we get, I decided that I was going to hand deliver a CMA to every single seller lead. Because a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times the contact information that we get is wrong, but what's the one thing that's right? And that's the property address. And so I show up at their doorstep with a CMA in a folder. I have custom folders that we've had printed, and I hand them their CMA. And that has gone so far with building rapport with these people.
Well, and let's dive a little bit deeper into this idea of, and you give the analogy of if you offer someone a penny versus $1 million, what would they accept? Talk about leverage for a moment. Talk about doing things that actually will help you scale.
Well, exactly. So for me, like I said, I'm really big into books. There's a book called StrengthsFinder. And I took that test. It's a book, and basically the book talks about all these different strengths. And when you take an online test, it gives you your top 5 strengths. And so I did that, and I figured out what am I really good at and what do I enjoy. Kind of like Judy was talking about, I did the same thing. I made a list of the parts of my business that I wanted to handle, and I said, I need somebody who will handle the rest. And so the compound effect is all about the little pieces, just the little pieces every single day, how they build to factor a whole that would equate success. And once you start seeing that success, then your momentum begins. And once you have that momentum rolling, it's so much easier to be successful once you keep that momentum going.
Yeah. And there's a great example of this, and I want everyone to write this down. A guy named Rand Fishkin, we had him on the water cooler not too long ago. He had a video called The Flywheel Effect. So what Amanda's talking about is this idea that if you can invest the same energy and effort into an activity, over time, it yields better and better results. right? So the flywheel effect, we won't get into it too much here, it's a great example of the marketing that you can do that creates that compound effect. Yeah. I think one of the things that every single person in this room struggles with is managing clients, right? And everyone can relate to that. I saw everyone kind of sigh when I mentioned it, right, at the beginning of today's talk. Talk to me about how you actually do that in terms of you have hours you don't work, right? And I think that we're in just one quick note before you answer, like we are conditioned to be on 24/7. That's not healthy. Great entrepreneurs don't do that. They shut down. They take time for themselves. So just talk a little bit about that and how you set that up with the client.
So one thing that I do when I'm working with a client is I explain to them, and that's part of my business, is that I feel like my clients come to work with me. I'm high energy, I'm very enthusiastic, I'm very thorough. And so I explain to my clients, look, I will give you my all. I will give you 100% of my effort. Here is who I am. I'm a single mom. I have 3 young children. I have a 1st grader, a 3rd grader, and a 5th grader. And I do it all by myself. I pick them up from school every day. I take them to school every day. Even the days their dad has them, I still am the driver. So I tell my clients, I am a mom. And so during the hours from 3 p.m. until 7 p.m., pretty much every day, I don't talk to my clients on the phone. I will still respond to texts and I will still respond to emails. But it's important to me during those hours to be a mom, because then during my business hours, then I feel like I don't have that guilt, like I'm split. Because when I'm really focused on being with my kids when I'm with my kids and being in my office when I'm in my office, it's better quality for both sides of my life.
Yeah. And how many people here saw that ad that company ran, which is like part-time agents and the mom with all the kids screaming, and then a full-time agent? Like, to me, there's a misperception in our industry. Fundamentally, first out, that was a ridiculous ad, and the people should be embarrassed for it, which I think they already are because they get shamed. But there's a misperception in our industry that we've got to be on 24/7. And in fact, successful people respect the fact that you respect yourself. Right? And this is, I think, at the crux of a lot of our anxiety and the misery that we sort of feel as entrepreneurs, is that like we just sort of throw ourselves out there. Joe and Taylor were talking about that before, which is like, the buyers are just driving people around all day long, and obviously that's not productive for your business. I wanted to talk about moving up in price point. I want to talk about sort of going into another market. So you're going to a listing presentation, and this is a market that, A, you probably haven't sold a lot of real estate in, right? Or maybe a price point you actually haven't tapped into. I get this question all the time. Hey, Jimmy, I want to move up to luxury. Or, hey, Jimmy, we're trying to get into this area. How do you overcome the fact that you don't have the experience and still get that listing appointment, still get that listing?
My very first luxury listing that I had was actually really funny how I got it. I was holding an open house for a different agent at a luxury listing, and the seller came by, and I didn't know who he was. And his house was also listed on the same street. And I was just very high energy, just being myself, having that mindset that I have a lot to offer to whoever I work with. And I picked up some buyers off that open house and called that seller, who I didn't know that was who he was, to show his house. So I arrived early so I could familiarize myself with the house, because it was a 10-acre estate and totally off the grid, solar. I mean, it was gorgeous, had a private lake on it, everything. So I really got to know this seller as he was showing me around his property prior to these buyers arriving. Well, those buyers didn't like that property. I ended up selling him a different $1.1 million estate. And about 2 months later, I get a phone call from that seller. And he said, I don't know if you remember who I am. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I remember who you are. And he said, I canceled my listing. And he said, I want you to sell my house. He said, you brought buyers. He said, my listing agent never one time brought a buyer. He said, and your energy and your enthusiasm, he said, I don't know anything about you. I don't know anything about your numbers. Come to find out, this man was a custom home builder and has built over 200 luxury homes in my area. So he has dealt with a million agents, and the fact that he came to me and said, I want you to sell my house, that was so rewarding to me of, once again, it's all about the mindset, and it's about me, and it's about being genuine and real. I pulled up to his house in my Honda Odyssey minivan. I mean, there was nothing luxury speaking about me there.
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic story for me because I think that, again, you guys have to think about, every time we ask someone who's actually done it, whether it's David Acosta we had on the show or this story here, like, there's that first step you have to take. And you build it up in your heads like this question you're going to get asked. But if you're enthusiastic, if you obviously are good at your job, like, the customer can feel it, right? They never might be able to communicate that, but they can feel it. I have one more question for you because, you know, now the business is growing, taking off. Next year, I think you'll be at 30 million, honestly, if not more than that. The team's growing, right?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about, with your schedule, with the things that are important to you, Lexi, who's the unsung hero in the audience here, how you empower Lexi and sort of what the plans are for the team.
So I am so incredibly blessed. I hired Lexi, it's been, next week will be 7 months ago, and she truly is my right hand. I had help in what would be the right profile of a person to hire for basically firing myself from the operations side. So I could literally just work with my clients and handle transactions. And I would tell you the biggest thing, like Chris was talking about earlier, like you were talking about, is empowering her. I tell her, look, you do it. And I kind of have, there were bumps along the way where we were learning to work with each other. I'd never had anybody work for me before. And let me backpedal. I was a stay-at-home mom. I went from being a stay-at-home mom to entering into real estate. I got a divorce, and it was me against the world. So truly, me protecting my babies against the world, I should say. And so it was a learning process, and Lexi has just learned with me along the way. And I just tell her, you do it, and I'll correct it if it's wrong. And I think that that's been probably our biggest key, is that I don't micromanage her. I don't want to micromanage her. I don't want to do that. I want her to feel like she has ownership in what she's doing and that she can experience the success with it as well. And that, I think, has been one of our biggest keys to success, is just the fact that I say, you know what, you do it, and if it's wrong, I'll let you know later.
Yeah, and last point there, Chris, and we'll close it out here, is we have a couple expressions at Curaytor. Let the duck drown. This idea, let the duck drown.
Or they'll never learn how to swim.
There's another part to that, thank you. Or never learn how to swim. Our animal announcers are terrible. Yeah, thank you. That's why we're both here.
All right, cool. Thank you, guys. Give it up for Amanda
Thank
and
you,
Jimmy.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you,
good.
man. Fantastic.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for sharing.